I'm Peter Brent. I'm a teaching artist. This is my studio. I do all my painting here. I have my classes here, and I hope I can teach you a few things about painting. Alright, let's start. Here we go. I'm starting with some yellow ochre, and I'm just placing the marks for the composition. This is the very early stage of the composition, and it'll be an oval shape. I've calculated the top and the bottom, and now I'm just indicating the sides. And I'll use the fan brush, which is a number 4, and the paint is very thin, just broken down with a little bit of turpentine. And I'm just going to use the brush on its side so that I can establish a very sketchy shape. As you can see, it's not a perfect oval, it's not a circle, it's just a shape. It's a roundish shape. It's close to an oval, and if I need to make adjustments, I can. You'll notice my brush strokes are short too, and they're staggered. They're very it's very sketchy, and I like to start out that way, and that way I'm not bound by a hard, strong line. I can make adjustments and changes. I keep it very light, very sketchy in the beginning, and I don't use much pressure. And you'll notice I use the brush on its side, and the fan brush is a wide brush, but if you use it on its narrow side, you can get some narrow lines. And I find that because it's a long handled brush, I can use it very loosely and very lightly. What I'm doing now is I'm calculating the eye line so that I can establish the tilt of the head. And this is about the center of the head. Most eye lines, whether it's a human or an animal, in this case the animal, is in the center of the skull, not the nose, it's the eyes. So what I've sketched in now is the tilt of the head. I've used the brush handle to calculate the tilt of the head, where the head's lying, since the left side is down a little bit and the eye line is angled. Now I'm going to calculate the distance between both eye sockets, and then I'll place the width of the eye socket in after that, which I'm doing now. And this is the top ridge of the eye socket, where the bone is closest to the surface, it protrudes slightly. That's the right one, or in the dog's case, the left one. And now the other one. And I like to keep all these shapes very simple and basic, and that way I can make adjustments. A lot of people put a lot of time and effort into and detail into the composition, and that's not a good idea, because it becomes a painted drawing, and you don't want that to happen. Now the next thing we're going to do is to calculate the angle of the muzzle, which in humans is the nose. Dogs have a wonderful long, most dogs anyway, have a long muzzle, this particular one. And I'm just doing the ridge line, the ridge of the muzzle down to the tip or the end of the nose where the nostrils will be, and I'm just calculating the top of the nose and the shape of the end of the nose. That'll come in next. And while I'm doing this, I'll talk to you also about the board I'm painting on, which is flat black undercoat. It's acrylic. It's easy to apply. I put mine on with a roller, but you can paint it on with a brush or a piece of cloth, a sponge, anything at all. And the underneath texture is not important. I like to paint on a fairly smooth surface because it makes it easier to brush over it. And I like to use a black undercoat. I used to use white. Some artists use different colours under their paintings to introduce a colour key. And if you, for instance, had a white canvas and you made a stain with, say for instance, some yellow ochre like we're using now, and made it into a wash and washed it over, then you get rid of that pure white underpainting, and it makes it a lot easier to recognise colours when you're working over the surface. And the reason that's the reason why I like to paint on a black board, so I can see the colours more accurately. And if I do miss bits and the black shows through, it makes a fairly attractive look to the work, and sometimes it just appears as shadows, and sometimes I actually use the black of the board as shadow in the painting. It becomes part of the painting. Now what I'm doing now is the outer part of the cheek, the lip I suppose you'd call it, and I'll bring the side of the head down, and you notice I'm using the brush on its side again, just putting in sketchy lines. I don't use a lot of pressure, and what I'm doing there is around about the bottom of the ear, where this is a long-eared dog, and the ears come down and flop on the surface. This dog, by the way, is well, how I came about painting this subject. One of my students in my class asked, could she paint an animal, or could we in the class paint an animal? And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, what about my pet dog, whose name's Bella? I'll bring in a photograph and see what you think. And of course we all fell in love with Bella straight away from the photograph, and we did a painting, and this is the end result. So I'm filming this live. This is the actual class we're sitting in, and this is what's happening as I paint. I'm doing a voiceover afterwards because the sound wasn't very good from the original sound recording during the studio session. Now there's the outer part of the lip that's gone in, and I like to use, in this case, yellow ochre. It's a very compatible colour to this composition, and you'll see why shortly once the colour goes on. I'll get back to that in a moment. I'll just get back to the structure here, and you can see that I'm keeping the paint very sketchy and light. I've thinned the paint very, very lightly with a little bit of turpentine, so that the paint comes off the brush a little bit easily than it would straight from the palette, because it's quite heavy bodied, and sometimes I like it like that, and I'll scumble it on, and scumbling's a term that we could describe as it's basically a dry brush technique, and scumbling's where you rub paint over a dry surface, and part of the underneath colouring, the dry colouring from underneath, shows through, and you get a visual colour mix. That's scumbling, and in this case I'm not using that. I might rub a little bit of dry colour over a surface just to establish a sketchy line, but scumbling's another area that we'll talk about later. Bring the outer, oh no, this is the inner line of the ear coming down. There's very big floppy ears coming down the inside there. You see that the dog is starting to take shape in the head now. I'm feeling the structure. The shape is very geometric, and it's a good idea to think along those lines, because we can recognise basic geometric shapes